Welcome to Season 4, Fixing America. This is Episode 42, Fixing the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA. In this episode, I will list the key problem areas affecting our veterans in 2026, the key problem areas related to the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA. Then we'll look briefly at the VA's current strategic plan. I will point out some holes and stupidities. Then I will present my plan to transform the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we'll end with a list of final comments and what I call Monday morning action. As in, this is all lovely, but what are we going to do differently Monday morning? So that's this episode 42. In episode 43, the VA plan that I present will get feedback from my special guest, Steve Sanson, who is a co-founder and currently president of Veterans in Politics International. Steve and I have been discussing these issues for more than 10 years, and recently he identified 5 clusters of problem areas for the VA and our veterans. Problem area number 1, delays in medical appointments. The wait time, how long veterans have to wait for initial appointments, follow-up appointments, special appointments. In 2013, it took 347 days for veterans to get their initial benefits. Can you imagine? You're injured on the battlefield, and our government takes a year to figure out what kind of benefits you have earned? Unacceptable. And even though in 2025, it took 131 days for veterans to receive their initial benefits, it's still unacceptable. The second problem area is delays in establishing benefits, working through the claims process, working through the appeals process. And again, this is a paper-driven system, and these kinds of delays are just unacceptable. There should be no delay. The third problem area is there's just straight out not enough clinical staff. And I mean by maybe 10,000 medical clinicians. There's not enough doctors, nurses, specialty clinicians for issues such as post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injuries, veteran suicide, depression, and a whole host of issues. Straight out, not enough staff. The fourth problem area that Steve identified is what he's calling the location lottery. Your experience at the VA could be a good one or a bad one, often depending on your zip code. So some facilities are fabulous, and far too many of them are underfunded or poorly managed. So that's the location lottery. The fifth area that Steve pointed out is the lack of accountability. At the VA, a lot of this has to do with not honest disclosure about how long it takes to actually get appointments. There was a scandal about it a few years back, but just no accountability, which I think is going to be an issue in all the agencies that we talk about. So the next step is, how do you turn that list of issues into a strategic plan? A strategic plan is like a roadmap. How do you present something so that everybody's on the same page and knows what direction that agency or department is going in? I like a strategic plan that has 4, 5, 6, 7 different priority goals. And then under those goals would be actions that implement those goals, make them happen. Sometimes actions are clustered together in a strategy. So a strategic plan would have goals, strategies, actions, timelines, who is accountable for those actions, and what is the measure of success. I like to see a strategic plan, the goals and strategies, all on one page because it tells a story. You have to be able to look at that plan those high-level goals and the key actions all on one page and understand it tells a story. It tells a story. For example, the 2012 New York City Department of Probation strategic plan to transform probation in New York City, what became called the New York City model. That strategic plan had 5 goals. The first one was safe communities, safety. And of course, the number one strategic goal of any law enforcement agency is safety, improving the safety of the communities that are encompassed by that plan. For New York City, safe communities was the first goal, but the second goal was incredibly important, and that was delivering opportunities, resources, and services to people on probation. And that was so key in transforming that department of probation, but actually in being part of how every department of probation was beginning to transform themselves in that general time frame. The third goal is one of my favorite ones, which is organizational excellence. And for probation, that included hiring, training, and fixing a whole lot of facilities issues like locks on doors. The fourth strategic goal was community engagement and strong partnerships, because none of that can happen without the community being part of the decisions about what opportunities, resources, and services will be delivered. And the fifth goal was measuring success, which for New York City, if we look at the measures, 2025 was the safest year for New York City in its history. There were, in this city of 8.5 million people, there were 305 murders in 2025. And while, yes, 305 is too many, it's out of 8.5 million people. And it wasn't just in New York City, because a lot of understanding of what kinds of opportunities, resources, and services needed to be delivered was being examined and implemented across America. In 2025, it seems like the homicide rate, the murder rate, had gone down to an incredibly low level, fewer homicides in almost 100 years. So the right work was done, the right measures were taken, the outcome of improved safety, lower crime. And when you look at it, it tells a story. Yes, we all want safer communities, but this is how it's going to happen. Opportunities, resources, and services. All right, so that tells a story. Now let's look at the Department of Veterans Affairs strategic plan for 2022 to 2028. Goal number 1, consistent communication. What? No. Goal number 1 has to be something that reflects the essence of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And communication is not it. Stick it into that organizational excellence category, sure. Not goal number 1. They kind of got it right with goal number 2, which was deliver high quality benefits, care, and services to veterans, their families, dependents, and their caregivers. The problem with how the VA did this, aside from calling it number 2, when it should be number 1, goal number 1, is that they just lumped everything into that. Everything from dealing with veteran suicide, veteran homelessness, to the problems with actually getting benefits delivered and how long things were taking, that wait time issue. See, it was too much under one goal inside a 214-page strategic plan. Who reads 214 pages? Nobody. The most complicated strategic plan I ever did was in aviation, the plan to transform aviation from ground-based radar to satellite-based communication, navigation, and surveillance. And that whole plan was only 32 pages. So the VA plan of 214 pages, forget it. You can't find anything in it. And what was amazing to me, there were incredibly important things buried in those 214 pages, like research about whether medical marijuana and alternative therapies actually help post-traumatic stress and nightmares related to battlefield encounters. So there was just too much in there, and things didn't get pulled out. The third strategic goal that the VA had was build and maintain trust. Well, that's important, but it's a measure. It's not a straight out goal. Do the right work and you will build trust. In and of itself, it's not a goal. It doesn't relate to actually doing the work. And goal number 4 was a kind of a collection of what I would call organizational excellence. It was governance, systems, data, and management practices. All right, that was the plan. How would I change it? So my plan has seven strategic goals, a little more than I usually like to do, but not too bad. And goal number 1 is deliver world-class benefits, care, and services. And the language in there is important, and I think they actually figured out some really important pieces to that, because it's deliver benefits, care, and services to meet the unique needs of veterans and their beneficiaries. What I put for goal number 2 is eliminate veteran suicides. Eliminate, down to 0. Because unless it's pulled out as a really high priority goal with a clear measure, it's just, what needs to be organized around that goal isn't going to happen. So I had as goal number 2, eliminate veteran suicide. Goal number 3, eliminate veteran homelessness. And a lot of what needs to happen to make both of those goals demonstrate progress is actually the same thing. The VA needs to really expand the number of clinicians, medical staff, psychological counseling staff. And in fact, since in 2025, the VA lost 40,000 employees, including 3,000 nurses and 1,000 doctors. We're talking about hiring 10, 15, 20,000 new clinicians. Goal number 4 is build a network of partnerships to deliver those benefits, care, and services. It can't be done without somehow partnering, not just with other agencies, which sometimes happens, but with local medical specialists, including local organizations that don't usually get government support, like Wounded Warriors, like Veterans in Politics International, like Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. These are organizations delivering on the ground direct, specific, and high-quality services, and they're not being supported by the Department of Veterans Affairs. For me, goal number 4 was totally transform that whole benefits, claims, and appeals process so that it's instantaneous. So veterans aren't waiting 100, 200, 300 days to get benefits related to battlefield injuries. Everything about all of that, the initial benefits, claims, appeals, it's all paper driven. And as we enter the era of artificial intelligence, it's time to make it instantaneous. There should be an instantaneous connection between what the Department of Defense or Department of War shows as an injury to someone on the battlefield It should immediately, instantaneously lead to benefits delivered by the VA. So we need to somehow fix that incredibly out of date paper driven process. A piece of that, transforming that paper driven process, is something that's called presumptive conditions. And this was a concept established in the 2024 PACT Act, which said that veterans could receive immediate benefits if they had certain kinds of conditions that related to, or a list of conditions related to toxic exposure, like burn pits, even going back as far as Agent Orange. So veterans no longer had to prove that their medical symptoms were related to their military service. It was presumed that if they were near toxic burn pits and they have lung issues, it's presumed that they're connected, and the veteran doesn't have to go through that paper-driven bureaucratic process to establish a connection. So the culture change piece of this is that the VA needs to assume that veterans are telling the truth instead of demanding an unreasonable amount of proving that their symptoms are related to their service. We need to expand the use of presumptive conditions, expand it to include all mental health conditions that are related to military service, and cover issues like tinnitus, which is related to traumatic brain injury, sleep apnea, hearing loss, back and knee pain. There's a whole bunch of issues that need to be presumed to be related to military service in a way that does not force veterans to go through this incredibly bureaucratic, red tape, paper-driven process. For me, goal number 6 is set national standards for quality of care. So this is what Steve called the location lottery. If there's a standard of care that's the same across the country, and we release performance scorecards, then veterans will know which facilities are getting a good score and which are not, and they have the choice. They can choose where to go based on clear information. And the 7th goal is require accountability. Now, I definitely have a feeling this is going to be relevant to pretty much all the departments and agencies that we talk about. But it's really, especially for the VA, it's tell the truth. Tell the truth about how long it takes for veterans to get their initial appointments. Tell the truth about how long it takes to go through an appeals process, and set standards that are reasonable from the point of view of veterans. Okay, so that's my plan. I have some final comments. 7, I like to make lists. And number 1 is that the VA plan is just way too wordy. As I said, it's 214 pages. So even things that are incredibly important get missed. And there are 2 things I want to pull out specifically. One is there is an effort ongoing to coordinate the Department of War's statements and decisions about battlefield injuries with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there is actually something happening, but who could find it in those 214 pages? And the other thing I discovered when I actually read the 214 pages is that the VA plays a role in national emergencies that I didn't really understand. So in a time of national emergency, for example, the 2013 bombing of marathon runners in Boston, the Boston bombing, not only did all the agencies and hospitals and medical care organizations send people to the site, but so did the VA. They have their own mobile medical units, and they went there too. But what was really interesting to me was that months after the Boston Marathon bombing, the VA paired soldiers who had lost legs and limbs on the battlefield with marathon runners who had lost legs and limbs in Boston for a peer-to-peer support group, which I believe in peer-to-peer support groups. I believe in veterans helping veterans. So that was a really powerful development that I didn't really understand before. My second final comment is more honesty. I do not think the Department of Defense or Department of War are honest about the extent of traumatic brain injuries, for example, and the medical conditions associated with that. So more clarity, more honesty. Number 3, as I've described before, more use of presumptive benefits. Stop making our veterans go through a bureaucratic loops and hoops and just presume that certain medical conditions are related to certain battlefield events. Another thing that I want to say is that we, the people, rely on 1% of America to serve in our military. 1%. So 99% of us are relying on 1% of us. And at the very least, I think we need to recognize that we owe our veterans. And we owe them honesty. We owe them our recognition that being in war often carries an emotional cost. And when our veterans come home, we really need to support those events that allow veterans to tell their stories, describe what happened to them, and we need to listen, deeply listen, so that the community helps them carry the burden of what's sometimes called moral injury, but just the burden of being in war. The 6th point I want to make is I don't think we can separate what veterans are experiencing from America's decisions about going to war. So I think that more veterans need to run for political office because I don't think they'll send us off to war, especially our bad decisions about going off to war. So not only more veterans running for political office, but really tilting Washington, D.C. towards diplomacy and peace building, which I understand is a big cultural change, and I'll talk about it more, but it is related to the experience of our veterans. And the last point I want to make before a quick summary and my Monday morning action. In season 4 of Fixing America, it is not my intention to comment on events day by day. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going agency by agency, department by department, looking at what's broken and presenting a plan to fix it. Not tweak it, but transform that agency so it delivers what it is it's supposed to do. So I don't want to comment on day-to-day events, but I can't talk about the VA and not mention the 2026 murder of Alex Pretty, a VA intensive care nurse. And while I do believe that the murder of Renee Good was a turning point in many ways in understanding government policies, the murder of Alex Pretty, I think for tens of millions of people, was the last straw. It certainly was felt personally. It was a personal violation for the 20 million or so veterans, living veterans, for the 22 million veteran family members and dependents, for the 5-6 million nurses in America. It was a personal violation that was people felt directly. And the bigger point I want to make about all of that is, even though while everyone talks about how divided we are and how much hatred there is in America at the moment, I really believe that a whole lot of it is a function of our broken government agencies. The rage and the anger is a direct result of how our government agencies have failed America, not just for years, but in some cases for decades. So I do believe that fixing our broken government will have a dramatic impact on America, one America. Okay, so in summary, I went through a list of problem areas, tried to translate that into a clear strategic plan. I'm doing that in a way where one episode will be about the broken department or agency, and the next episode will be feedback about the plan that I present. And the last thing I want to talk about is what I call the Monday morning action, as in this is all lovely, but what are we going to do differently Monday morning? And what I want to ask you to do is just one step, do one thing, take one action to help veterans. And I don't care if it's a pair of socks, a blanket, visiting a veterans home, going to veterans events, designing an event in your community that includes veterans. Just take one step to help veterans. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you.